So to create our joint hinge here, it's going to take a little bit more effort, and we're going to be using a spline. That's going to give us a little bit more control over what we're doing. Because if you look at it from the side view here, you can see it's just a basic circle, kind of like our cylinder that we use for our elbow and our shoulder. But this type of hinge joint is actually going to rotate for more stability in between two outside flanges, and that should look like it give it a little bit more structure. Alright, so what we have to do is we're going to utilize this view, the right view, as our template guide to draw that spline. So we're going to scroll in here so we have a little bit more control over what we're doing. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a spline that goes around, down, and then back up. And then within that we're going to create an outline so that our hinge actually has a negative space in the interior. We're going to start with the linear spline, and then we're going to round that later using some of the edit spline functions. So I'm going to click down here and start. Start here, click up, start at the corner. I'm going to make it almost a diamond shape with this. Back down, and then I'll run the Attributes Manager close spline. So there's a couple different ways you can round this off. We're going to be using the soft interpolation, and what that's going to do is it's going to add some Bezier handles here on those points that we can pull forward, and using the move tool here. Make sure you're in move tool. I'm going to scroll on a little bit further so I can see exactly what it is I'm doing. And you can see as I straighten those Bezier handles out, Bezier, I'm getting a nice flush movement here. Here where these two joints are, or here where these two points are, as I pull that in, it kind of straightens my line out a bit. Here we go. We need to create points that are a little bit closer together so that we get a little bit more of a roundness to here where it creates that function. So I'm going to select both points, right click, and then we're going to use what's called the chamfer tool. And I'm going to click outside of that and drag to my right. And you can see what that does. It adds a few points rounded that area, but it also gave us some handles on the inside there. Not the same type of handles we had for the Bezier type handles. And we're going to scroll in here just a little bit. And I'm going to use my move tool. So T on my keyboard to select that. And then what I'm going to do here is drag that up just a bit. Alt-D to get rid of the access bar if it's in your way. And so when I click out of that, it's actually kind of created more of a sharper edge there for what I needed. If I bring that up just a bit more. Okay. And that gives us a little bit more neatness there where that's going around. I'm going to make just a few more adjustments by straightening out this Bezier handle. Move tool. And you see as I pull those in, I get a nice kind of critical juncture that's nice and sharp for what we're needing. And make sure that this one's straightened out just a little bit more. Again, if I can make those completely perpendicular, straight up and down to the actual horizontal axis, I'll have a much rounder surface. And you can see this point meets the line down here. I'll go ahead and drag that one down to the line there also. Alright, that looks pretty good. We got a nice round spline. Next thing that we're going to do is, on that spline, make sure that it is closed here in the Attributes Manager, so it does close it at the bottom. It's very important. If it's not closed, it's going to cause a lot of problems. Click outside of that spline to deselect everything. And then what you're going to do is, just like we right-clicked, you have another menu up here. It's exactly the same as a right-click. You're going to come down here and create outline. And right now it's set at 5 centimeters. I'm just going to leave that as a default. Click OK. And what had happened here is it actually created that outline on the outside. We didn't want that. So what we're going to do is Command Z and go back, put a -5 centimeters, and click Apply. That looks pretty good. That's about what we want for that. As you notice, that point here is not as tight, but it's not too bad. So we have the spline, we have our center here in our circle. We're going to get extrude NURBS, drag that spline up underneath the extrude NURBS, and as you can see, it's stretching it on the Z-axis. Well, we don't want it to go that direction. We want it to go out along the X-axis here. So we just need to click on our extrude NURBS, select the Z-axis. Remember, it's always X, Y, Z. Click 0 in the Z, and then in the X-axis, go ahead and give it 15 centimeters. And you can see now how we've created a leg that has a center point that will rotate around a circular joint on the interior there for what we're going to be utilizing it for. So go ahead and drag that over using your model tool and your move tool. Select the extrude NURBS, Alt D to get the access point back again. It looks like it's too wide. I'm going to go ahead and make this an 8 centimeters. I'm going to make it editable. And as you can see, when we do an extrude NURBS, it makes 2 caps on each end and the actual extrusion itself in between. So we're going to select all 3 of those. Again, open it up and come up here to Objects, Connect, and Delete. So that makes it all one object. Now, like we did before in earlier exercises, when you have an extrude NURBS, it creates that cap. And just because you've connected them and deleted them doesn't mean those caps are connected to the surface. So for instance, if I select the Use Polygon tool and just select that first cap, I can actually drag it away. Well, that could be useful in some instances if we just wanted this or the interior. But what we want to do is connect those. And to do that, click outside to deselect, Functions, Optimize, leave it as a default, click OK. And what that should do, if your caps are appropriately close, is it should weld those points together where they're at that tolerance mean of 0.1 centimeters was selected there. Alright, so that's done. We're in the Objects Manager where it says Extrude NURBS 1, and hold down Control to drag up and create a copy of that. And then we're going to move that copy using the Use Model tool. Again, so I don't just have a polygon selected, but I have the actual just the object itself. And oops, I'm going to move it directly over. Now if you notice in my front menu there's no axes down here. I can see it here, but I cannot see it here. That means my axis is probably somewhere off of where it needs to be. So we're going to move that axis back down so it's more in the middle of both of these. And so I'm going to use not Model tool, but the Use Axis tool here, right here. And I'm going to move that axis down kind of where I want it, kind of right there in the middle where that circle where it's going to bend. And I'm going to move it here in on the right angle. Right. Use Point tool. Hit my space bar, live selection, make sure only select visible elements is off. I'm going to click outside in the right menu, paint the lower polygons here, and I'm going to go ahead and bring those all the way up. We're actually going to be utilizing that to create our bridged object. Okay. So what I have now is this area where it comes down, and then I have some areas that I need to knife. So my K on the keyboard for my knife. And I'm going to go to line this time, and I want to make single cuts. Right. And go ahead and leave visible only on this time. I'm going to rotate around. Here's one instance where working in perspective mode does make this a little bit more efficient, quicker to do. As you notice when I knife this, the I start at one point and then my knife automatically kind of jumps and highlights the other point that I'm going to white. That's when I know I can release my knife. Alright, I've created a 4-sided polygon here. We're pretty good. And the other ones are n-gons. Ideally, these would all again be connected across and knived, but we're not going to worry about this for this project. Alright, so I'm going to take these two interior polygons out. Live selection tool, use polygon tool. Make sure that only select visible elements is turned back on. I'm going to select the interior polygons, holding down the shift key, and delete. We need to close or bridge those up. So instead of using the bridge tool, what we're going to use is the stitch and sew tool. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually do a loop selection on its edge here. As you can see, as I hit UL on my keyboard, it's not allowing me to loop around that boundary. I need to select boundary loop over here in the Attributes Manager. Right, and that allows me to select that loop and the other loop that I'm going to be stitching and sewing together. Right, so we can see the interior and the edges of those. And so what I'm going to do is hit MP on my keyboard, and I'm going to be dragging from one corner directly parallel across to the other corner, holding down the shift key on my keyboard. And when I let go, what it does is it draws a bridge basically across there, or bridges those polygons. So now I've got a nice solid surface between my hinge. Right. The last thing I need to do here is I need to extrude this lower polygon down. So use polygon tool, live selection. Make sure only select visible elements is turned on. And going back to all 4 menus here, from my front, I'm going to be extruding this all the way down to this area here. Okay. So go ahead and make that a little bit larger. MT on the keyboard. Alright, the last thing I'm going to do is, you can see again I'm up a little bit high here on my hinge, so to select those we're going to use a different selection tool. We're going to use the drag rectangle selection tool, and points mode here, visible elements is off. Click and drag outside with that rectangle, drag up and come across. And that should select any of those points that are across there. And now I can drag that down so that it reaches where my tool is here. And I'm going to go ahead and increase the thickness of this a little bit. So I'm going to select those, bring it up, and select the bottom ones, and bring them down a little bit. Right? The other thing that I have here, as you can see, it's a little wonky. This needs to come in a little bit, it looks like to me. So I'm going to use my rectangle tool and select this right side, bring it in, and again you see this little curve that we have here, bit of a curve. That is not too much of a problem, but we probably would want to straighten that out. And I can't do that when I have both objects selected here. So what we're going to do first is select both of these objects, click outside, connect and delete. So what we've done now is where we've bridged those, they're all one object. What I'm really worried about here is basically that size and the X value. And you can see by putting a 0 in there and clicking on that, it actually zeroes that out so they all align. I'm going to do the same thing here for these. 0. And the right. 0. Enter on my keyboard. And 0. Enter. And that straightens it out. Modeling is all about making refinements, working general to specific. Again, I'm going to have, since I still have these selected, I'm going to go ahead and drag them in. And I'm going to bring these in just a little bit more too. There we go. So now if we look at our hinge joint, we can see that we have a nice little hinge joint here that will connect for the knee. And the last thing that'll have to come out of here is a little rectangle, and it will be down to the foot.